Beatdown's combat primarily consists of, you may have guessed it, punching and kicking. You can string together combos based on which moves you've learned and which ones link together. The game uses a very simple low, medium, and high hit detection system, and while some moves do hit harder than others, because of this hit detection system, the most important thing to remember is to attack in varied spots on the opponent's body and to attack quickly. However, there is an option for slower, more deliberate strikes, and that is grappling. There are multiple kinds of grapples that take various amounts of time to perform. Some have higher success rates than others, and it also depends on which character you use. These first two facets make up most of the combat in Beatdown, and they are fairly simple, but there is a third element to the combat that acts as something of a wild card. There are weapons available, and the weapons deal massive damage, cannot be blocked except by another weapon, and massively change the player's moveset, sometimes for the worse by restricting it. As near as I can tell, each character seems to have a preferred weapon type, and some characters will work better with some weapons than others. So now it's time to talk defensive. Blocking is as simple as it gets. You block high to block a high attack, you block low to block a low attack, and block middle to block middle attacks. There is also a weave function that can enable you to briefly become invincible, but if timed incorrectly will leave you massively vulnerable. Grappling can break through a block or weave, but you can still break out of the grapple. The game's group combat is the combat style most people probably think of when they refer to beat-em-ups. Most of the moves used in 1v1 fights carry over, but not all of them. The group combat controls mostly the same and uses the same buttons, but functions a bit differently, as you can now perform back attacks with more ease, choose to activate free run by holding down L1, or press circle to activate a desperation attack. Group combat is generally chaotic and messy. Because of its unpredictable nature, it's highly risky to engage in group combat without allies, as a few rotten punches from multiple directions can utterly ruin your health bar. 1v1 combat, by contrast, is more simple and calculated and comes in two forms. There are boss characters where the goal is simply to reduce the opponent's health bar completely, and there are normal brawls where you can choose to either deplete the opponent's health or their pride meter. When an opponent's pride meter is empty, you can grapple them to end the fight earlier and gain additional benefits from your victory. I'll just come out and say that the AI very obviously reads your button presses. The game contains a kind of difficulty you may be familiar with in other games where the AI puts on a convincing show of selectively blocking attacks to foster the illusion that they're flawed, but they can still clearly see your moves ahead of time. Like most other games that use this form of design, I don't think it's too bothersome, since in this case it's properly balanced and rewards the player for using varied moves. If you use longer combos or combos that hit at varying heights on the opponent's body, the opponent will reward you by briefly ceasing to block, creating an opening for you. How frequently an opponent blocks mostly depends on where you're at in the story, but you'll just have to trust me when I say that the balance is acceptable, in spite of the AI's psychic abilities. In group fights, on the other hand, the AI resorts to traditional beat-em-up enemy behavior. The smaller, weaker enemies dodge around a lot and go in for quick jabs, while the lumbering giants attempt to smash you with barrels. There's even an enemy type called Guard, whose entire gimmick is blocking, since the other group combat enemies don't really do that. The AI's reaction to grappling depends vastly on their style of fighting, which is tied into the RPG mechanics. The combat mechanics of Beatdown aren't too complicated, and figuring out how to optimize your character's unique moveset for both styles of combat is the most important aspect. It is quite possible to beat the game with only the standard moves, though like most things mentioned in this video, it will be easier if you involve the RPG mechanics, which we'll discuss later.